Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Aphrodite and Hera? Part 2. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. It's mine, Aphrodite said firmly with the fire of determination burning in her eyes. Nope. It's mine. Beatrice said back as she glared at the goddess of love. On the sideline, Naruto was watching the two with a nervous smile on his face. It has been 2 weeks since Venusa became his neighbor. Ever since she found out he was her neighbor, the beautiful lady had been constantly coming here to have his food. She said she was still finding a job and her money was limited at that time. Do I have any say in it? Naruto asked only for him to receive a chorus no from the two, making him sweat drop. He had just returned home with enough materials to cook ramen for Ichiraku, and what greeted him was the fighting scene of his neighbor and daughter over a pudding cake. Aside from being an author, Naruto loved ramen to the point he had mastered the art of cooking it in just one day and decided to open a ramen stand himself. Ichiraku was its name. People would think opening a ramen stand in New York was crazy, but after the first day, Ichiraku had become infamous with its delicious food and handsome chef. Back to the main problem, Aphrodite and Beatrice were still fighting over the pudding. They were bucking their head together with their hands pinching and stretching the other's cheeks. A tick mark appeared on Naruto's forehead as he walked to them, grabbed the pudding and ate it in one go. The expression on Aphrodite and Beatrice's face were priceless. They stood there for a second before they slumped down, black cloud hovering above their head as the two silently cried for the death of their precious pudding. I can't believe it, Naruto-kun has just killed a pudding. Aphrodite said as she used her handkerchief to wipe the fresh tears that were rolling on her cheeks. Do-chan is cruel. He ate the pudding. Beatrice said as she cried for the unfortunate pudding that had been unfortunately eaten by her father, who had no interest in love and sweets. Another tick mark appeared on Naruto's head as he turned toward them. You two aren't going to eat it either. And don't talk like that. You two make me feel like the worst person in the world right now. Naruto said with his eyebrow twitching continuously and left the room to prepare the materials. He needed to do that before opening Ichiraku. Washing dishes and bowls, preparing proper ingredients. Although Venusa was an employee at his ramen stand, she really sucks at doing things like this, and so, he had to do it instead. He unconsciously remembered the day when he hired the redhead. That day was horrible to say the least. Naruto house 2 weeks ago. After the usual meeting between the goddesses ended, Aphrodite had wasted no time to teleport to her house, changing into some casual cloths, and visited Naruto's house. She was wearing the cloth she used the day before, since her object of affection seemed to like it, if the small blush on his cheeks whenever he looked at her was any indication. The goddess smiled sweetly at the blonde and followed him house. Again, it was still early in the morning, and little Beatrice had already sat on the dining table, waiting for her father to finish making breakfast. Aphrodite flashed a smile at the little girl, hoping to calm things down between them. Beatrice looked at her for a second before looked away, taking no interest in the, in her opinion, creepy lady. Aphrodite sweat dropped and sighed. She had to admitted that she was extremely suck at making first impression. You came again, Dai-chan. Naruto said with a questioning look on his face. Not that he had a problem with having guests as beautiful as her, but he wanted to know why. Hearing the question, the goddess quickly thought of a solution. Miraculously, a light bulb appeared on her head and immediately, she took on a sad face and looked at the blonde almost guiltily. I just moved here and don't have any job. My money is limited and my cooking is horrible. I thought I could come here to rely on you, since you are my only acquaintance here. Aphrodite stood up, still looking at the ground below. But if you don't want me here, thinking that I'm a nuisance, then I will gladly leave, Naruto-san. The goddess said, her tone sound almost broken, and began walking to the door. Naruto felt like he was the worst person in the world for making the beautiful redhead feel like that and ran after her. Catching her delicate hand in his, and scratched his cheek with his other hand, a blush on his face. Her hand was soft and small in his one. I wouldn't mind you come here, Dai-chan. And if you wanted, you could help me at Ichiraku. Naruto said quietly. Aphrodite turned around and hugged the blonde to her chest. Even if it wasn't as big as some others goddesses, she still took pride in her chest, since it went well with her body, and still bigger than some, not too big but not small either. Naruto tried to struggle with his face as red as Aphrodite's hair, but to no avail. The woman's grip was extremely strong for someone like her. The goddess was smiling happily while unknowingly suffocating Naruto in her chest. After a while, Aphrodite finally released Naruto and was horrified when she saw his blue face and a trickle of blood flowed out of his nose. Naruto-kun, stay with me, Naruto-kun. Aphrodite called out to the blonde while violently shaking him. At the dining table, Beatrice's stomach growled and she looked at the funny scene with a sweat drop. Later that day. Tonight was the first night of Aphrodite's job and she was nervous but excited at the same time. According to Naruto, her job was to take order from customers and bring food to them. The blonde hadn't told her what she should wear, so here she was, standing before the mirror again, various cloths and uniforms hovering around her, waiting to be chosen. Aphrodite snapped her finger and in a blink, she was wearing another cloth. The cloth consisted of a white long-sleeved shirt with red trims went from her shoulder down to her wrists and a black skirt with golden trim every crinkle. Her hair still flowed down her back gracefully, but she had bangs covered her forehead and two long bangs framing her face. Instead of her signature autumn leaf, Aphrodite had a white headband made of silk on her head, which had a white small ribbon just above her right ear, replaced her leaf. Her ruby necklace was displaced, shining in the darkness in her room. Aphrodite nodded, she looked like a delicate and modest girl now. With her cloth done, Aphrodite opened her door to see Naruto waiting for her. He wore a long-sleeve white shirt just like her, blue jean with no decorating and nothing more. Aphrodite sighed, even if he was going to be a chef, his cloth didn't need to be so plain. "Ready?" Naruto asked and she nodded. The two of them walked together to his Ichiraku raiment stand, which wasn't too far from their current location. With some more preparation, Naruto opened his raiment stand and waited for people to come. About 3 hours into work, Naruto was crying over his pile of broken bowls and dishes. His raiment stand closed since he had no more raiment to serve. Aphrodite, as beautiful as she was extremely sucked at doing things. In the span of 3 hours, she had broken more than 48 raiment bowls, 37 dishes, 23 glasses, pissed off more than 30 customers by serving the wrong dish or worse, introduced their face and head to the steaming hot ramen. The redhead was standing behind him, fidgeting nervously, her eyes averting here and there, trying to avoid looking at her boss at the moment. Her cloth had been soaked in ramen soups, she even had some noodle on her head, falling on her face. This was her first day and again, she had made an extremely bad impression. Taking wrong orders, tripping and falling, breaking almost every bowls and dishes Naruto had in store. Taking a step closer to the blonde, she opened her mouth to talk but closed it since she didn't know if he would forgive her or not. She wanted to take the job to be closer to Naruto, but with her clumsiness, she had made his stand's reputation take a trip to hell. He would hate her, and then, she would be kicked away, he won't. "Are you okay, Dai-chan?" Naruto asked as he stood up, looking at her with concern. Her mind almost shut down from the question that only one word could come out of her mouth. "Huh? I said, if you were okay. Your cloth and all," Naruto said with a blush on his face as he averted his eyes. Looking at herself, Aphrodite noticed that her black bra was noticeable through the soaked white shirt. The goddess also blushed but shook her head and bowed at Naruto. "Sorry, Naruto-kun," she said with saddened face as she kept her head down. She could hear footsteps as Naruto closed the distance between them. She closed her eyes and prepared for whatever punishment the blonde would put her through. It was her fault after all, and she would take responsibility of her clumsiness. A hand touched her head. "Don't worry, Dai-chan, I'm not angry or anything," Naruto said as he smiled at the goddess. How could he stay angry at her when she bowed to him like that? She readily took responsibility for her fault and she felt apologize for what she had done. He couldn't and wouldn't angry at her. After all, her clumsiness was so much like his deceased wife. His face saddened at the time Aphrodite looked up and without her ability activated, she mistook it and stepped back. The goddess of love smiled sadly as she looked aside, avoiding eyes contact with Naruto. "It's my fault, Naruto-kun, don't say anything. I know you are angry or worse, you have hated me now. Don't worry, I understand," Aphrodite said quietly. She didn't fake any of that. All she said were real. She looked like she was going to cry and that made Naruto feel like he had just committed the most dangerous crime. "I'm useless, ain't I, Naruto-kun?" Aphrodite clenched her eyes shut, preventing the tears from falling. Aside from being beautiful, she didn't know how to do anything. She hated herself so much right now. If she weren't so useless, the blonde wouldn't hate her. If she wasn't so useless, maybe, she would make the blonde love her already. While Aphrodite was dealing with her emotion, Naruto was having his own trouble to deal with. The woman in front of him was crying, even if she had clenched her eyes shut to keep her tears from falling, he could clearly see that she was crying. He remembered when he said he would give her a spot at his Ichiraku, he could literally felt the happiness radiated from her, and the hug she gave him that moment was great to say the least, even if it almost made him die of suffocating. She was nervous but also excited at finally helping him out, even if all she did was breaking bowls and dished. There also were some funny moments when a customer said they were a couple. Of course he declined and said he was a married man, but he had seen the pain in her eyes, even if it was small, and had turned into determination right after that. "No, you aren't," Naruto said as he embraced the goddess in her arms. Aphrodite opened her eyes and tried to struggle out of his embrace, even if she wanted to remain in his arms like this. Despite a ramen soup-soaked shirt, Aphrodite could feel Naruto's hard-toned body brush up against her. His arms wrapped around her slim waist and shoulder. She stayed silent and didn't do anything. She couldn't break free from his embrace, and he didn't want to release her any soon either. Aphrodite closed her eyes, basking herself in the warmth that Naruto was radiating. Just like their first meet, she could feel his aura of trust and protectiveness. "You are my friend and my lovely neighbor, I don't stay angry at you or anything. Don't say you are useless, because to me, you have something that others don't," Naruto said quietly, and Aphrodite nuzzled into the crook of his neck, her arms went around his neck. "Really?" she asked quietly, and she could felt the blonde nodded. "You have the ability to make one happy and open the heart of other. Your clumsiness is just a way to make that happen," Naruto said, and Aphrodite cried happy tears that someone had said that to her aside from Hestia. The goddess of the heart had told so too when she helped her prepare tea and cookies for their meeting. Let's just say that everything hadn't gone as planned. To hear that from Naruto, her object of affection. "Thanks, Naruto-kun." She wanted to say that she loved him, today's event just made she wanted to make their relationship advance faster. But after some thoughts, Aphrodite decided to take things slowly. The blonde wasn't ready yet. Olympus Hera's temple present. Hera was deep in thought. 2 weeks of constant watching had made her more curious about a certain blonde named Uzumaki Naruto. She had watched him fight, she had watched him talk with the goddess of love, she had watched him helping people, and finally, she had watched his happy moment when playing with Beatrice. He was a good father and a good husband too. He was kind towards others and protective of his loved ones. Those were what Hera wanted in the man of her life. Powerful but not power-hungry or arrogant, a faithful husband who treasured his family above all else, being handsome was a bonus though. Hera wasn't too certain though, so she would visit his little ramen stand sooner or later. Naruto's Ichiraku. It was a beautiful good day, and Naruto decided to open Ichiraku all day to bring his business back on track. It had been a month since Dite Venusa became his employee. Honestly, it was a horrible month to say the least. The beautiful lady was very clumsy when it came to housework and many others. Good thing was that she was willing to learn. She was still clumsy but wasn't too much like before anymore. The blonde sighed as he placed his palm under his chin and looked up at the clear blue sky. It really was a nice day, and it couldn't get any better when a beautiful blonde woman walked into his stand. Olympus Hera's temple minutes earlier. Hera sighed and placed her feather pen on the table. She had just finished her paperwork for today. She leaned back on her throne and closed her eyes, trying to get some much rest. Images of a certain blonde demigod appeared in her mind, caused her eyes to snap open. A slight smile made its way to her face as her blood-red eyes softened. To think about it, it has been 2 weeks already, and I haven't had a chance to visit his ramen stand. Hera thought silently before she stood up and walked to the entrance of her temple. I wonder what Aphrodite will do when she see me. The goddess of marriage mused to herself, and in a flash, she had disappeared. She would see if he was worthy of her attention or not before taking her next move. Naruto's Ichiraku. Welcome, Naruto said to the beautiful blonde woman as she entered his ramen stand. She wore a long-sleeve white shirt with blue jean. Blonde smooth hair flowed down her back, gracefully framing her face and covered her forehead, her blood-red eyes looking at him in amusement. What are your orders, lady? Naruto asked with a smile on his face. The woman smiled back as she called her order. A miso ramen. With that, Naruto went to do his job, leaving the beautiful blonde at her seat, looking at him all the while. A man like him is bound to meet Aphrodite eventually, handsome and so full of love. I don't know you are here too, a familiar voice snapped the blonde out of her thought as she narrowed her eyes and looked at her right. Standing there was an extremely large man with tan skin, and white hair flowed down to his mid-back, while those on top of his head standing straight. Any lesser mortal would be intimidated just by looking at him. His height was easily around 7, and his muscles upon muscles body didn't help much either. The man looked like he could easily carry a car while walking around, which wasn't a problem considering who he was. Mother, the tan man said. A smirk made its way to his face as his slit violet eyes looking at the beautiful blonde woman in amusement. Hephaestus, the smirk on his face widened as the man now identified as Hephaestus took a seat next to the beautiful blonde, who was no doubt Hera by the way he addressed her. Naruto came and delivered Hera her bowl of ramen and asked for the god of blacksmith's order. Miso ramen. With that, Naruto went off again, and the two immortals sat there in silent. The smirk on Hephaestus's face never ceased as he looked at his mother, who was eating the ramen elegantly. Decided to go with it, huh, mother? Hephaestus asked seriously as he ate his bowl. Hearing the question, Hera reluctantly placed down her chopstick and nodded with her eyes closed. Hephaestus, despite their bad relationship in the past, had become her favorite son after he rescued her from the black pit of Tartarus. And your target is Aphrodite's boyfriend? The god of blacksmith asked with amusement in his voice. Hera narrowed her eyes at Hephaestus. How could he know about Aphrodite's relationship? What would he do about that? Hera began to worry since everyone in Olympus knew what Hephaestus had done to Ares after he found out about Aphrodite's relationship with the god of war. How? Hephaestus smirked at his mother and puffed his muscles chest out proudly. I'm the god of blacksmith and to an extent, machine. My spy network isn't to be underestimated. Hera nodded and opened her mouth but was cut off by her son, who knew what she was going to say. Don't worry, I won't harm your little boyfriend. A death glare was sent to him by Hera, but he just shrugged it off like it was nothing. Naruto wasn't her boyfriend, and he wasn't a boy. Man or life partner sounded better for her. Then again, they weren't in a relationship with each other yet. So she would prefer potential life partner. In fact, I give you and Dite my full support in this. Hephaestus said, that annoying smirk still on his face. Hera blinked and looked at him questioningly. Hephaestus? Support his wife and his mother cheating? In that situation, even a calm goddess like Hera could only give out one answer. With that, the god of blacksmith burst out laughing, ignoring the death glare Hera was giving him for daring to prank her. Despite his fearsome feature, Hephaestus was a lively god with as much talent in trolling and pranking that even Hermes had trouble when being targeted. The laughter died down, and Hephaestus ordered another bowl. He had to admit that the stuff was good and could rival his mother's and Hesja's homemade. The two ate in silence with Hera having an annoyed look on her face. Hephaestus had been finding his chance at trolling her ever since their relationship cooled down, and while it was annoying, it also was heartwarming to the goddess of marriage. Hera wanted a happy family after all. Why? Hera asked, she couldn't understand. Her son always tried to embarrass Aphrodite and Ares when the two were still in a relationship together. Why would he support his wife cheating on him now? Do you still remember when Zeus ordered me to marry Aphrodite? Hera nodded. Of course she remembered. Aphrodite had been so tearful back then when she tried to convince her into voiding her marriage with Hephaestus. If it wasn't because of Zeus, she would have helped her back then. Hephaestus had also come and talked with her about the same problem, but to no avail. She widened her eyes as she thought about it. Right. I don't love Aphrodite, she is beautiful and extremely adorable, but she isn't my type of woman. And Aphrodite had said she didn't have any feelings for me either. We are just husband and wife on paper, not once did we sleep together. We are just friend at most. Hephaestus said honestly as he ordered another bowl, adding to his already pretty tall pile. I hate Ares and don't want Dite to settle down with him, that's why there are a lot of trap around the world just for them. This time, I fully support her because I know this boy, Uzumaki Naruto, could make her happy. Hera nodded at that. She could feel his love now, and true to Aphrodite's story about his love was the most beautiful thing ever. Hera smiled softly at that, but sighed a moment later. Because of Hephaestus, she hadn't had the chance to talk to Naruto to know him better. But there was still time, she would continue to observe her target before she deemed he was worthy of being her partner for the rest for eternity. Mother, I know you want happy family too, and Uzumaki Naruto can give it to you. I don't plan to stop you from seducing him. A death glare was sent to him courtesy of Hera, she knew that was true, but seduce sounded like she was stealing him from someone. Conquer his heart or fight for his affection sounded better. Just beware of father. He won't take it lightly if he find out you are cheating on him. Hera frowned as she placed her chopstick down after he had finished 4 bowls and stood up. HN, that bastard doesn't deserve me as his wife, never have and never will. He cheats on me countless times, he doesn't have the right to say that. With that, Hera walked up to Naruto and asked him for the recipe of his delicious ramen. She couldn't do delicious food without knowing the recipe it took. That's why only she and Hesja could cook so well. If Aphrodite tried to make food with her magic without knowing the recipe and how to cook it, it would just blown off on her face. I wish you good luck then. When it came to love, Aphrodite would be pretty scary. Me too, son. Hera waved goodbye to Naruto and walked away to find a safe spot before teleporting away, leaving no trace behind. At Ichiraku, Hephaestus sat silently on his chair before he felt a familiar celestial power behind him and stood up. Aphrodite had just returned from the supermarket. Naruto had tasked her the mission to buy groceries, and she had completed it. Skipping to Ichiraku with a smile on her face, Aphrodite quickly froze when she felt his celestial power. Her eyes turned dull and the smile on her face disappeared. She walked slowly to the huge man, her mind racing, trying to find a reason for Hephaestus to be here. Based on her experiences, the god of blacksmith had always tried to ruin her dates with Ares. Could it be that he wanted to kill Naruto too? Turning around, Hephaestus was greeted by a narrowed eyes Aphrodite. The goddess of love was standing there, with her arms crossed looking at him with cautious eyes. He smirked. Look like you find yourself a good boyfriend, Aphrodite. Uzumaki Naruto, huh? Her eyes turned cold as her boyfriend's name was mentioned. Her relationship with him wasn't official yet, and the blonde hadn't said anything either, but she knew that he was having thought about her lately. As if fate was playing with her life, Hephaestus her husband came and she didn't have a clue about what he was going to do now. Cool down, Aphrodite. I'm not going to do anything, in fact, I'll give you my full support this time. Just like Hera earlier, Aphrodite blinked and could only utter a single word. Huh? This time, Hephaestus' sweat dropped. Why did he keep receiving that reaction? The god of blacksmiths sighed, maybe he should stop trolling people. But life would be too boring if there was no troll. As I said, I totally agree with your relationship with Uzumaki Naruto and give you my full support. He said and retold his reasons to Aphrodite with that annoying smirk on his face again. Aphrodite's eyes lit up and she bowed at Hephaestus, who raised an eyebrow at her sudden action. Normally, Aphrodite would hug people when she wanted to thank someone, he was not an exception. The light bulb suddenly appeared on his head as he looked behind him to see the blonde demigod serving his customers with a smile on his face. Uzumaki Naruto had somehow changed Aphrodite into a prober woman who no longer made unnecessary close contact with others. The goddess of love was willing to change for her love, his mother would be facing a hard opponent now. He shrugged of Aphrodite's thank and wished her good luck one last time before walking away to find a safe location to teleport back to Olympus. He had job to do. Who is he, Dite? Your acquaintance? Naruto asked from afar and Aphrodite turned to him, smiling radiantly. She shook her head and ran up to him with a grocery bag. Hey, just an old friend of mine, Naruto-kun. Naruto smiled and the two continued the business. Later that day, Naruto's house. Beatrice. I'm home, Naruto called out as he stepped into his house with Dite Venusa following closely behind him. Despite having her own house just a few steps from his, the beautiful redhead always stayed at his home except night, but that was because he kicked her out before she could beg him to let her stay and sleep on his bed with him. Welcome home, Tu-chan, Dite-chan. Beatrice's relationship with Aphrodite had advanced pretty fast ever since the goddess of love gave the little girl some of the sweets she received from a relative in French. She ran to the little girl and hugged her with as much passion as possible. Laughter could be heard from even far away as the two played with each other. Standing at the entrance to his house, looking at the scene before him, Naruto couldn't suppress a smile from gracing his face. A burning, strange sensation in his heart as he watched the two played with each other. He wanted to protect them, he wanted to do everything he could for them, and he wanted the three of them could stay this way forever. He didn't know if it was too late or too early, but there was one thing Naruto had just realized. This family needed a woman named Dite Venusa and he needed her as well. The cheerful, beautiful lady with a love for sweet had become an indispensable part of his little family and his life. At that moment, Uzumaki Naruto had silently made a vow to himself. Even if gods and demons standing in his way, he wouldn't back down from protecting her, ever. That's a promise. And an Uzumaki never breaks a promise. Olympus, Ares' temple. Sitting on his throne with nothing to do, the god of war looked at his table to see a picture of him and Aphrodite. Come to think about it, it had been a while since his last encounter with the goddess of love. He couldn't find her, and when he asked someone who might know her current location, namely Athena, Hestia, Hephaestus and Apollo, they shooed him away. Athena said she had nothing to tell him, but he knew that the goddess of wisdom just didn't want to tell him if her narrowed eyes and flaring power when talking to him were any indications. The talk he had with Hestia was more peaceful. The goddess of family just refused to say him anything and shoot him away while sipping tea. Hephaestus, his bane of existence, laughed into his face for letting Aphrodite found out his true self and introduced his face to one of the many hammers in his workshop without telling a thing. About Apollo, the god of sun really irritated him to no end with his answer. He knew Aphrodite's location and he also knew what she was trying to accomplish, but he refused to say him anything too. That day, when he tried to threaten Apollo, he had, once again, been surprised. Olympus, Apollo's temple a few days prior. Apollo was sitting on his throne, reading an orange book while chuckling uncontrollably. The god of sun, prophecy and poems, son of Zeus, twin brother of Artemis and self-proclaimed best archer in the world. He was a pale-skinned man with long brown hair tied into a big braid down to his lower back and golden eyes. He wore brown long pants with no decorating and a sleeveless unbuttoned brown old-style shirt. Since his temple was extremely hot, his clothing style made it more bearable while working. The god of sun turned his gaze from his book to the entrance of his temple to see none other than Ares. The god of war walked into his temple with a smug smile on his face like he owned the temple himself. Apollo narrowed his eyes for a moment but then smiled lazily at the red-head god. It would do him no good irritating his so-called half-brother. "Yeah, Ares-kun, what bring you to my temple?" Apollo asked lazily as he pocketed his book, placing one hand under his chin to support his head and looked at Ares. The god of war stopped midway and looked at him with a frown on his face. "You know my reason, Apollo," Ares said with a smirk on his face. The god of sun looked at him questioningly for a moment, then, miraculously, a light bulb appeared on his head as he looked like he had just remembered something. He gave Ares a goofy grin. "About your porn book you requested me a year ago, huh?" A tick mark appeared on Ares' head as he looked at his half-brother with a twitching eyebrow. How the heck can he remember something that long, but forget something just happened recently was unknown to him. "I asked you about Dite's location 3 days ago, brother," Ares said, barely restraining his anger at the god of sun. He didn't want to make bad blood with Apollo, the god of sun knew what he wanted to know, and until he knew Aphrodite's current location, he would be a good guy. As good as he could. Several question marks appeared on Apollo's head as he tried to remember the talk he had with the god of war. Finally, they merged into one big mark in gold shining brightly as Apollo grinned as Ares again. "I remembered. It's true that you requested me finding her for you." Ares nodded, patiently waiting for his answer. Apollo's eyes turned serious and the grin on his face disappeared, replaced by the face of a seasoned warrior who had seen and survived war. "What if I said I don't know?" Ares looked up at Apollo questioningly before a snarl appeared on his face. "You lie, Aphrodite must have come here and made you keep silent by spreading her legs for you." Ares shouted as his power flared, fire appeared in the air around him, his fists clenched tight, and his eyes looked at Apollo with as much killing intent as possible. The god of sun didn't faze however, and raised his hand in the air. The sky shined brightly as a golden portal appeared above his hand and ran out his golden chariot. The chariot ran at Ares with impressive speed which caused the god of war to jump away and looked at Apollo with gritted teeth. Before he could say anything though, fireball from small to big flied out of the chariot and attacked him in all direction. Boom. A sounding boom could be heard as all the fireballs hit its target. Apollo looked at the spot where Ares stood a moment later and with a wave of his hand, all the smokes were cleared, revealing an unscratched god of war with some sort of invisible barrier around his body. "Why are you doing this, Apollo?" "Or I was right. That slut came here and offered her body to you in exchange for silent right?" Ares asked with that smirk on his face again. Apollo looked lazily at his half-lazy and picked out his orange book. He didn't want to deal with him right now. "Sex with Aphrodite was great, but it's a shame I didn't have the chance to do it with her as much as you can. The one who made her go away was you, Ares. You don't have the right to know her whereabouts at the moment." A fireball went straight through the air, aiming for the orange book Apollo was holding, but was caught in his hand before it could hit its target. The god of sun looked at his brother with an annoyed look on his face, his golden eyes shining brightly as his celestial power increased. Responded to his power, his golden chariot ran straight at Ares again, but the god of war jumped away right in time to avoid the impact. "You're so jealous that you want to keep her for yourself, huh?" Ares said with a smirk and Apollo smirked back at him. "Nope. I'm not the type of man who force women into submission or a relationship if they don't like it. Aphrodite doesn't love me, so I won't force her. I respect female after all. Unlike you." Apollo placed his book on his table and stood up, hands in pockets. "Aphrodite is living happily with the man of her life. I can see her happy future with him. I won't let you ruin that future, Ares. Return to your temple, I want to continue my story," Apollo said calmly. Ares wanted to retort, but before he could do anything, an arrow went straight through the air and cut his cheek, golden blood flowed out of his injury before it healed with a hiss. He looked up only to be greeted by Apollo's ultimate skill. World of Light. World of Light was Apollo's ultimate skill which granted him the ability to bend all the light in this world to his will. There was no escape for those who was targeted. Apollo was that scary when he took something serious. Ares could feel his armor began to heat up under so many fake suns. Yes, Apollo had compressed light into ball of light which began a fake sun and had them aimed at him in all direction. Each ball held enough power to blow off a district and all of those balls combined together could wipe out an entire country. "You're in my territory, Ares. You're no match for me right now. Leave while the chance still lasted," brother Apollo said seriously and stressed the last part. If Aphrodite's target was anyone different, he would have told Ares to avoid trouble, but luckily for her. Her target was his favorite author, so he would make her a favor this time. Ares snarled and flashed away without another word. Olympus, Ares' temple. He and Apollo were rivaled in power. The two of them could fight for all mouth, but in the end, no one would win. But back then, Apollo was boosted by being in his territory and had already activated World of Light. The chance of him even emerged alive after the god of sun thrown those balls at him was from slim to zero. Talked about winning. But that wasn't a problem for him. The trip had given him some useful information after all. That woman dared to seduce another man, huh? Ares thought, amused by the fact that his bitch dared to do against his word, his rules. "I'll teach you a lesson, Dite. And this time, this will be a hard lesson for you. Haha. Ha 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 ha." Ares' laugh could be heard all around his territory, scaring his servants to the core. "Heroes?" Ares called out to his son. If love was involved, Eros would no doubt had no trouble finding them, and then, he would come, killed the man Aphrodite loved and took her home, punished her for daring to go against him. Aphrodite was his, only his, and it would stay that way forever. No one could change that fact. New York. Naruto's house. Days passed, weeks passed and eventually, months passed. Aphrodite didn't remember how many times had passed since she came to mortal realms and lived with one Uzumaki Naruto. She was happy that she made that decision. To come down to earth and find her happiness, believing in Hecate's words. Funny thing is that her object of affection was said goddess's son too. It's like everything were prepared before and Hecate knew what was going to happen. Sitting on the chair and looked out the window next to her, Aphrodite sighed. It was 2012, just a few days before the winter solstice began. When it began, she would have to return to Olympus for the meeting. Once half a year, all the Olympians would gather together and discuss about the world. Plans would be proposed and solutions would be brought up. The meeting usually lasted for a week, and that meant a week of constant talking about boring things and a week of no Naruto. Aphrodite could easily sleep after finishing her report to pass the day or played with Ares. Of course she didn't want to do anything with the god of war now, but a week of not seeing Naruto was a big no-no for her. Aphrodite sighed, even if she hated it, she had to show up at the meeting, if not, big trouble would arrive. Deep in her thought, Aphrodite never noticed Naruto had been standing behind her for a while now. The blonde had a pleasant smile on his face as he looked at the beautiful redhead. Time had made him realize that this woman meant a lot to him and to his daughter as well. He still loved his wife, Crovia. She would live in his heart forever, but he needed to look toward the future. Beatrice needed a mother to take care of her, and also, when the girl grown up, she would have Dite to talk about girls' problems. He needed her too. Beautiful, adorable, funny and always full of energy. He needed her to light up his world which had been darkened when Crovia passed away. Even if he tried to deny it, Crovia's sudden death had changed his look toward the world, yet Dite Venusa had somehow managed to make him feel at peace again. He needed her here, this family needed her. And so, he decided to take the next step in their strange relationship. Ichiraku wouldn't be opened anytime soon due to the cold weather, so they had some days off to do whatever they wanted. Silently, Naruto walked up behind Aphrodite and embraced her, making the goddess of love blush at the sudden bold action of her target. She could feel his hot breath on her ears and his strong arms coiled around her slim waist, holding her firmly. Instinctively, she leaned back, melted into Naruto's embrace and closed her eyes. She knew the blonde knew about her affection for him, and sooner or later, he would do something. It's just that she hadn't expected the blonde to be the one to act first. Let's date, Dite. New York. Aphrodite's house. Needless to say, the goddess was extremely happy to finally have a date with her object of affection, her boyfriend and hopefully soon-to-be husband too. She was nervous but at the same time, happy and confident. She was nervous because it was her first reel with someone who actually loved her genuinely, not because of her beauty, happy because her dream was one step closer to become real, and confident because she didn't know why she was feeling confident. Aside from that, there was a little of bad feeling that told her something would happen and ruin her date with Naruto. Not letting it bother her, Aphrodite snapped her finger and various cloths appeared out of nowhere, all hovering around her, awaiting their orders. The sky outside was cold, so she needed some warm cloth, but at the same time, pretty enough to catch Naruto's attention. She would wear a coat too, so instead of skirt, Aphrodite chose blue jean pants and a plain white t-shirt to better went with it. With her cloths already chosen, Aphrodite snapped her finger again and in a flash she was wearing a new outfit. Her red hair flowed down her back gracefully like it had always done before, her signature autumn leaf was tied just above her right ear, two long bangs framing her face, and several strands fell over her forehead. Even if it was winter, she still liked her autumn leaf more because autumn was the season of love and romance, never said she didn't like some blue snowflake on her red head either. It's just ridiculous. She wore a big brown coat with fur collar and many pocket, matching scarf and plain blue jean. Aphrodite also wore shoes instead of high heels. Even she knew which one was better for walking in a snowy day, you know. Opening her wooden door, she saw the familiar face of her boyfriend Uzumaki Naruto. He wore black jean with white knees and a small chain attached it for fashion. Unlike Aphrodite, Naruto had no reason to wear such a big coat, he only wore a long-sleeved black shirt with and a white light coat with hood and red decorating. The blonde smiled at the goddess of love and offered her his right arm, which Aphrodite happily latched onto and walked with the blonde out the snowy street of New York. To say the couple caught the attention of everyone on the street was an understatement. It's not every day you saw a happy couple walked with each other on street in winter days, hand in hand. Man would leered and whistled at Aphrodite, hoping to catch her attention. Earl would wink and blow kiss at Naruto, but none was brave enough to approach him with a very dangerous red head latched tightly onto his arm, glaring at every girl who dared to seduce her man. The walk, despite being short, was pleasant. The two entered a normal restaurant and seated at a corner near the window. A waitress came and took their order before going away, leaving the new couple seated opposite each other in a comfortable silence. Outside, snows were falling, and Aphrodite was mesmerized by how beautiful the scenery was. It didn't help that the restaurant was playing You Are My Angel by Loretta Chow. Overall, it made her feel like she was the main heroine in a romance movie, with Naruto being the protagonist. My father had told me a story in the past when a goddess came down to this world and met an unbearable man who always followed after her despite rain or snow. Naruto's voice caught Aphrodite's attention and she turned to him with curious eyes, urging him to continue the story. Actually, the story was somehow like her and Naruto's story, just in reverse positions. She was the one who to follow, no scratch that to stalk him, not the other way around. Naruto smiled at the goddess and continued his story about the past. The story of his father and a goddess named Hecate. Want to know something funny, father? Something mother is hiding from you. Don't lie to me, demigod. You have the master bolt, my accursed wife had stolen it from me and gave to you. You don't have the right to talk to her like that, Zeus. I'll take care of Beatrice, no need to worry. Half-blood is the only place you can take the quest, Naruto. Sorry, my childs. Don't apology to me. It's you who turned me into the tree. You are the worst goddess, only think of yourself and nothing more. Leave. Thank you for saving Naruto Koi when he faced Ares, Kurama-san. The game will be between Uzumaki Naruto, Lady Hera and Lady Aphrodite versus the entire camp. You must save her, Naruto Koi. Save her from her darkness, just like you did to me. This is your mother's home, Cocytus. Hahaha, come and beat me, Uzumaki Naruto. Let's me tell you something, demigod, he has given me his power, I'm invincible. Hahaha. Ajudama. It's you. If you didn't exist, everything wouldn't have happened. For the sake of Olympus, I'll make you disappear. I'll break your fantasy, Zeus. Force of nature Gaia's root. I can sense it, her enormous nature energy, it's just like she is the nature itself. Uzumaki Naruto, what an interesting individual. Tartarus is opening, every titans and monsters are coming out of their prisons. This is war. If we don't do something, this world will be destroyed. Come with me, Naruto, we will conquer the earth together, I'll give this world to you. It seems we must cooperate with each other, Cronus. This world is corrupted by human, that's why Gaia is so angry at mortals. She isn't my mother, I can tell it by clashing with her. Her darkness is even darker than mine, and the Gaia I know is a loving mother who always has love and spare. Senpu. Chao Damarasan Shuriken. What's wrong isn't me, what's wrong is this world. Let's do it, Kurama. You will be mine, Naruto. Namikaze Minato wasn't a normal man, at least not anymore. After he had completed his sage training from a yokai he met, he became capable of using magic and seeing things that a normal mortal wasn't allowed to see. Minato had taken on the responsibility of being a sage to protect the people of his country from supernatural beings. The existence of gods and monsters came as a shock to him at first, but eventually they became a part of his life, a part of his job. He saw monsters causing chaos everywhere, he saw people suffered because of things they weren't even aware of. The day was a snow day. In other words, just another day for Minato to protect the innocent. No one forced him into doing it, he just wanted to. He wanted to protect the people from monsters and the misfortune they would bring to their target. He ducked under a lunge from a hellhound, his spiky blonde hair, though not as spiky as Naruto's, being ruffled by the wind. The clearing he was in was filled with a horde of monsters ranging from hellhounds to cyclops, and even the legendary Minotaur, which made him wonder how it even got here in Japan. A sly smirk graced his whiskerless cheeks as he used the opening provided by the beast's attack to slash its belly from underneath it with a kunai. His clothes consisted of blue pants, a long-sleeved blue shirt which was covered by a snow-white coat with red flames licking the bottom, which had the kanji for sage printed in red on the back. Minato flipped back, avoiding a swing from the mighty Minotaur, and threw two kunais at its eyes, hitting the literal bull's-eye and momentarily blinding the mythical monster. Seeing his chance, Minato ran at it with his top speed and jumped. His right arm glowed with sky-blue energy as he used magic to strengthen it. No normal metals could hope to kill a monster, that's what he had found out in his first encounter with those supernatural beings. Only magical imbued metal and magic-based attacks could kill them, but eventually, they would reform and come back even more powerful and angry. Minato slammed his fist, which had been enhanced by his magic, on top of the Minotaur's forehead. The power behind his fist was so much that its cranium caved and the beast crashed down, creating a crater on the ground. Landing on its corpse, which turned into golden dust, Minato looked around to calculate his next move. 16 down 22 left, Minato mumbled, and a frown appeared on his face. He didn't know what had happened, but these monsters were strange to say the least. Normally, monsters didn't work in groups with the exception of hellhounds that often hunted in packs, they acted on their own and rarely worked together. That's what his 2 years of fighting experience told him. But it seemed like this horde was a special case. So far, he had killed 16 monsters, there were 22 more, but he was at his limit, his breathing was getting ragged, and his limbs were shaking from the effect of using so much magic. He knew he would not last much longer, but he'd be damned if he didn't take some more monsters down with him. As if knowing of his situation, the monsters decided to finish him off with an all-out charge from all sides. Minato shakily got into a fighting stance and readied himself for his final battle, but before the monsters could lunge at him, blue bullets of energy suddenly shot down from the sky, killing every monster in sight. Minato, relieved, fell back on his butt and looked up to see his savior only for his heart to skip a beat. Recommend Ost, release my soul Hiroyuki Sawano. While the wind kept blowing and the snow kept falling, Minato felt like the world had stopped the moment he saw her. Beauty, elegance and majesty were the first things to come to his mind, but he knew even those words would fail to describe the being in front of him. Although having a petite body, the angel still looked mature and wise. The young woman was levitating in the air, her left hand outstretched with some blue wisps flying around her. She turned her gaze to him and Minato, too stunned to do anything, just sat there and stared back. Time seemed to freeze as the two kept staring at each other. He could see her lip movements indicating that she was talking to him, but at the moment, he just wanted to look at her and nothing more. He wanted to admire the otherworldly beauty of the angel in front of him, who had saved him and graced this world with her magnificent presence. The girl's eyes narrowed a bit in annoyance as the blonde man down there. She waved her hand, and some small wisps flew at his direction in hopes of waking him up from his trance. When she talked, she wanted the one she addressed to listen, and the mortal below her had just ignored her words completely to look at her. Nonsense. She was well aware of her own look. She didn't have big breasts like her fellow goddesses, she didn't have long legs or a good height like them either. She was just a petite goddess who looked like a young teenager, even though she was a titaness in the past. That mortal had no reason to look at her with those creepy eyes. The wisps flew down at Minato and exploded like bubbles around him, causing the blonde man to feel some stinging sensations. Finally snapped out of his trance, Minato looked at the angel in his eyes with a radiant smile that would make any mortal female fall for him. Hello, Tenshi-san. The girl looked at him with puzzled eyes and tilted her head to his side, not understanding what he was saying. She is a goddess, he can call her a titaness too since she was one in the past. But she isn't an angel by any means. She didn't have wings and one of those shiny halos on top of her head. How could he call her an angel? Tenshi? I'm not an angel, she replied coldly with her melodic voice, and Minato smiled. In my eyes, you are an angel. Again, the girl tilted her head to his side. Could that mean he have some sort of amnesia, an illusion? If not, why would he see her as an angel? I don't understand. Minato laughed heartily at the reply, but regretted it a moment later when those blue wisps flew at him again. He looked up to see the girl frowned at his action. Coughing into his fist, Minato outstretched his hand to the blue-haired angel, the smile never leaving his face. Nice to meet you, Tenshi-san. I'm Namikaze Minato, the guardian of Kyoto. The girl looked at the hand before slowly, she landed and shook his hand. Hecate, goddess and titaness of magic, the mysterious and ghosts. Commonly known as Queen of Darkness. Back to Naruto and Aphrodite. Aphrodite listened to the story with sparkles in her eyes. As the goddess of love, she loves hearing romance story, and this story was special. This was a story about one of her fellow goddess, Hecate, and her love story with the father of Naruto. This also was the chance for her to know more about her object of affection. That's how father met mother. Maybe you had known already, but I'm their son, Uzumaki Naruto, son of Hecate, and I'm a demigod. Naruto said, smiling all the while. He was proud to be a demigod, unlike some Aphrodite had met before. Some demigod hated the gods because they had brought them to life and then left them to their mortal parent, never met or talked to them again. Thinking about it caused Aphrodite to think about all of her children at Camp Half-Blood. Even if they were unwanted children of her and her partners in the past, they are all her flesh and blood. Yes, they were unwanted children in the first place. Aphrodite only wanted to have child with the one she truly loved and loved her truly, but when lost in the pleasure of sex, even she couldn't control herself. She felt guilty, but what could she do? Coming to Camp Half-Blood meant telling Ares her whereabouts, and she didn't want that. Another time, perhaps. She would come and apologize to them. Living with Naruto had made her realize that familial love was awesome. Already, she started seeing Beatrice as her daughter, and the feeling of it was great. Mother was very stubborn though, but father was even more stubborn. He followed her all days and all nights, hoping to know more about his angel. For him, it was a love at first sight. Naruto's voice snapped Aphrodite out of her thought, and the goddess of love once again paid her full attention on the story. Kyoto 26 years ago, 1 week after Minato met Hecate. At first, Minato was shocked to hear that the angel who had saved his life was a goddess, but when he thought about it, it seemed right. Only a god could have enough power to kill a bunch of mythical monsters that easily. When he asked her for the reason, Hecate said she had come here to kill those monsters which had been attracted to this place's sudden rising of celestial power. He wanted to know about this goddess, but he needed to do something about this problem too. Offering his help, Minato was straightly shot down by Hecate, who said she didn't need any help, especially from a normal mortal. It hurt him, but he wouldn't give up just because of that. That's why he was here, following, i.e. stalking, Hecate to an abandoned village somewhere in the north. So this is your destination? Minato asked, and the goddess of magic nodded with her eyes closed. She didn't want to say anything to this unbearable mortal. He had been stalking her for weeks, and despite threatening him, he just kept stalking her. She had read his thoughts before, but she couldn't understand what he was thinking about her. There was that warm feeling in his heart and some nervousness when he talked to her. He still thought she was an angel too. He also thought she was beautiful and elegant. The goddess of magic had blushed a little when she read that. What do we have in this town? Minato asked again, and Hecate calmly pointed her staff to the entrance of the town. So it seemed that only she could feel its presence. This town wasn't an abandoned village, there was a spell masking the true nature of the village. As the wisps flew out of her staff and approached the village, a pink mist could be seen covering the whole place, which were responsible for hiding its presence and changing its appearance. The wisps flew away, carrying the pink mist to reveal a cave, a large cave full of monsters. Minato's eyes widened in realization, for the duo just came upon a very large group. He clenched his fists when he saw human mutilated corpses lying here and there, being feasted on by those monsters and the hatchlings. The scene made him almost vomit, but he held it in for the sake of avenging the innocent victims and the martyrs who fell protecting them. He looked at Hecate, the priestess-like goddess looked on at the scene with impassive eyes, not at all affected by what was happening in front of her. The blonde had to wonder if the goddess of magic had any kind of emotions in her or not. The whole week he followed her, the only other expression he saw on her face, other than that poker face, was curiosity. She raised her staff again and pointed its tip at the entrance of the cave. Hecate whispered the name of her spell. Aster. From the tip of Hecate's staff, a blue ball of energy could be seen forming, and from there multiple blue energy bullets shot out, killing all the monsters upon impact. Minato watched on in amazement. Just like its name, the attack looked like an aster flower blooming around Hecate and attacked her foes from all directions. Not wanting to leave everything to the goddess, Minato also charged forward. He could see the slightly surprised look on her face but still continued onward, telling her everything would be okay. He slashed those monsters down with his magic-enhanced weapon, killing them left and right with each slash. They had no chance to counter since Hecate's aster was raining down from above mercilessly. Minato was slashing them with superior speed. A nice combination. Although having some trouble penetrating the heart and skin of some monsters like the legendary Nemean lion, Minato still did a good enough job keeping them in place for Hecate to finish them off. In less than 10 minutes, the two of them had killed all the monsters and now was standing side by side at the entrance of the cave. Minato looked at Hecate, but his eyes caught something from behind, and immediately, his reflexes kicked in. He jumped over Hecate, causing the goddess of magic to look behind her as well. The scene made her eyes widen a little and her mouth to open a bit. Minato, a normal mortal and a stranger to her, had jumped behind her and used his right arm to block a bite from a hellhound that had somehow managed to escape their battle. It hurt like hell, but Minato still had enough strength in him to cut the monster's head off with the kunai in his other arm. The blonde fell to the ground, panting and holding his injured arm. Blood poured out of it non-stop, and Minato was beginning to show signs of fatigue. Hecate kneeled down to examine the injury. If he hadn't used magic to enhance his arm, it would have been bit off by the hellhound. Placing one hand over the injury, wisps started to gather around her hand, and miraculously, the blood stopped flowing. Minato looked at the goddess of magic with awe and saw her eyes. For a moment, the ever-poker-faced goddess was showing a hint of worry in her eyes, although her face remained impassive. Why? Minato heard her question and smiled. Why would I need a reason to protect a girl? Her expression didn't change, and she just continued healing him. I'm an immortal. That beast can't hurt me, and even if it can, I will just reform again. Immortal or not, you are still a girl. And a man's duty is to protect girls. Minato said, smiling radiantly. Hecate's magic stopped for a moment and a small tiny smile came to her face. This man really was one of a kind. Despite what he said, not many men will willingly use his own body to shield a girl from a hellhound. Slowly but surely, Minato's wound closed and Hecate stood up before she entered the now empty cave. The blonde followed her without any hesitations. It was dark, but with the goddess of magic by his side, he had nothing to fear. Holding her glowing staff in hand, Hecate led the way and not too long after that, they had reached the bottom of the cave. That's what attracted those monsters, an artifact. Hecate explained and picked up the dust-covered book. It was an old book covered with dust and radiating celestial power into the air. That was the reason for the area's sudden increase in celestial power and what attracted those monsters. Hecate looked at the book and blue wisps suddenly raised out of the earth, swirling around the artifact for a moment before dissipating. The goddess of magic glanced at Minato, who was still looking on with curiosity and interest, and handed the book to him, causing the blonde's eyes to widen in surprise. It had been sealed and no longer radiated celestial power into the air. Now, it was simply a normal book holding ancient knowledge in it. Huh? It's a gift from me. Think of it as a thank you for saving me back then. Use it wisely, Sage Hecate said softly, trying to hide a small blush on her face. This the first time she had given a mortal a gift, so it was only natural for her to feel embarrassed. This Namikaze Minato seems interesting. She would keep her eyes on him. Who knew there would be a later time when she would meet him again. Turning around, a tiny smile appeared on her lip and without further delay, Hecate disappeared from view, leaving a rather disappointed Minato alone in the dark cave. Back to Naruto. Naruto and Aphrodite had left the restaurant earlier and were walking side by side to the nearest park where they could freely talk to each other. Despite the snowy sky, it's always good to walk a little after eating. The goddess of beauty chuckled at the awkward story of Naruto's father and Hecate. The story was becoming more and more interesting. Sitting beside Naruto on a bench they had found nearby, Aphrodite looked at Naruto with awaiting eyes, urging him to continue the love story. The action made Naruto chuckle a little. Father treasured that book above all else. After some research, he had found out that the book was one about Japan ancient magic like fuinjutsu, ninjutsu and some mystical taijutsu. Because of it, father became stronger and fell even deeper for mother. It was about 2 months after that, when the spring festival came, that he had the chance to meet her again. Naruto continued the story with a nostalgic smile on his face. His father had told him this story more than he could remember, and the radiant smile on the older blonde's face told him how much he was proud of his father. Naruto told Aphrodite this story to show her that he had placed his trust in her and also a hint of what he was about to do. The underworld Cocytus River 25 years ago, 3 months after Kyoto incident. Hecate was meditating on top of the black water of the river Cocytus. This was her home, her territory, her safe haven, completely separated from the outside world. A giant cave with no sources of light except for an enormous amounts of blue wisps radiating blue magic, hence the shining sky blue light inside the cave. Kneeling at the center of the river runs through her cave was Hecate. Her hands held together like she was praying. But in fact, she was meditating to collect magic and celestial power from the river, which was filled with lost guilty souls. Each wisp's equivalent for 1 soul. She absorbs the magic in those lost souls before leaving them to her servants to guide them back to Hades, who would decide what to do with them. Without her here to keep those lost souls, ghosts would have filled the mortal realms when they followed the river Styx out of the underworld. That's also why she was called the goddess of ghosts. No ghosts would exist if she didn't agree with their reasons to return to the world of the living. Hecate had been here for eons and listened to the story of more than 1 billion souls. Some were tragic, tearful, some were happy and cheerful. Yet, she would never understand their feelings. Each time she absorbs the magic in them, their memories would flow into her and she would know everything about them, but no matter how she tried, Hecate would never know what the cause of their feelings was. Love, anger, happy, fear, she could feel them, but she couldn't understand them. It was so strange and so mysterious. Today was no different, she could feel them in every soul, but again she couldn't tell how and why they felt that way. She listened to some love story of some female souls, how they felt so lonely without their lover, how they were happy when their beau returned their affections, etc. She would ask them why they felt that way, but the answer she got always the same. Isn't it obvious? I love him. It's love. I don't know, maybe because I love him. Love, what is that exactly? Hecate sighed and stood up. She had absorbed enough magic and the rest would be guided by her servants to Hades. She had something to do and that something involved the blonde sage she met several months ago. Kyoto 25 years ago, 3 months after Kyoto incident. The sky of Kyoto was printed pink with sakura petals flying everywhere. It was spring after all, and in Japan, there is no spring without sakura petals. The day was the spring festival, a festival people hold every year to celebrate the sakuras blooming. They walked around the town, trading goods, eating and drinking. It was fun, but for one Namikaze Minato, today was just another normal day. Sitting on a sakura tree branch with a sake bottle in his hand, Minato glanced at the sky and the image of a blue hair goddess miraculously appeared in his mind. 3 months had passed since their first meeting and he hadn't had the chance to see her again. In that period he had spent almost all his time in his room, reading the book his angel his goddess gave him with passion and love. He longed for the day when they would meet each other again, he would show her what he could do and tell her his feelings. Of course he didn't hold his hope very high, his object of affection was a goddess after all, and immortal, was probably no chance for him, but he wanted to, at least, try and fail. That way, he would be happy and continued with his daily live, hoping that time would make him forget her. Taking a sip, Minato glanced at the sky again, his eyes dropped a little as the sake had finally affected his body. A little sleep then with that, Minato closed his eyes, ready to surrender to Morpheus's realm. Namikaze Minato, his eyes snapped open in surprise. He looked around to find the source of that voice. It was her voice, there was no doubt about that. Even if the time he traveled with her was short, he would never forget her melodic beautiful voice. The voice of his angel. Hecate, there she was, standing on the ground in all her majestic otherworldly beauty. She didn't change much, that style of clothing and that poker face. Minato chuckled, and in just a moment, he had moved in front of Hecate, smiling all the time. Just like when she saved him, the two of them just stared at each other before Minato suddenly hugged Hecate, making the goddess gasp a little to show in surprise, but didn't resist the hug. By using her ability, she could feel his happiness and love for her. Why? I missed you, Hecate, Minato whispered, and Hecate felt her heart skip a beat. It was strange. This man, this mortal who she had just met, had been invading her mind lately. Whenever she thought about love and romance, whenever she tried to figure out the strange but warm feeling in her heart, this man appeared in her mind. The past 3 months had been pretty much terrible. She kept pacing out whenever she thought about this man, the way he talked, the way he fought, and the way he looked at her was like he was looking at the most precious thing in the world. She had asked Aphrodite for advice about this problem only to be teased by the redhead. It's the sign that he loves you, Hecate. Take your chance. Hecate remembered Aphrodite saying those words with a cheerful smile on her face. The child of you two must be very handsome or beautiful and strong too, considering your boyfriend is a sage, and there hasn't been a single demigod with a sage as mortal parent. Hecate's sweat dropped at that part. She hadn't made her decision yet, and the goddess of love had already proved herself to be a threat to her children's future love live. That is, if she would have any with Namikaze Minato. The blonde released Hecate and looked at her blank face with a nostalgic but happy smile. The goddess of magic still showed no emotions, but looking carefully, he could see a tint of pink on her cheeks. They stood there in an awkward silence for a while. Minato because he didn't know what to say and Hecate because she was being Hecate. I have free time today, the goddess finally said, looking straight into Minato's eyes like she was waiting for something. The blonde looked puzzled for a moment before he took the hint and smiled radiantly. This was his chance. Then how about you do me the honor of accompanying me to the spring festival? He asked with a polite bow. Hecate gave the faintest of smiles, nodded, and the two walked away. Hecate's strange style of clothing attracted attention from the locals, but she shook it off like nothing and just followed Minato to wherever he led her to. She had nothing to be afraid of, Minato was just a mortal, if he tried anything, one blast would be enough to send him to the underworld, and she had read his thoughts. I'll make this day her happiest day. It made her smile a little. Never had she felt someone care so much for her and her happiness. The feeling was strange but great at the same time. Minato led her to many stands, some selling food, some selling antiques, toys, flowers, and even took her to a fortune-telling stand where she had to suppress a chuckle at the mortal's attempts to read her future. How could they see a person's future anyways? Apollo is the only god of prophecy, so he is the only one who can see a person's future and destiny. However, those chosen by Apollo also can do the same, and one of them was staying at Camp Half-Blood at the moment. Hecate's domains were mystery, magic and ghosts, so she can see the future to an extent too, but not enough to make a prophecy or predict what will happen. By looking into their soul and the link of destiny inside them, she could see a person's role in this world. In Minato's case, his role is supposed to be the one who fathers the child of the prophecy of this world. That's all, no info about how or when. If she, a goddess, can't do that, then how a mortal can see a person's future? Ignoring the fortune-telling stand, Hecate followed Minato to a ramen stand. Apparently, the blonde loved ramen. She could see noodles, soup, beef's just a normal bowl of noodles. Even the taste had little difference, why would he love it so much? The goddess mused but decided to let it slide, different people have different tastes. The day went on with Minato leading Hecate around the town, playing various traditional games, and eating pretty much everything the town had to offer. Mortals are hard to understand, Hecate mused as she stood on the top of Minato's house. It was night and the blonde had invited her home to some sake, which was like wine in a way. The day was pretty fun but still, she didn't know how to think about it, especially when Minato laughed despite losing a game. Normally, he would be upset and angry, but the blonde just shook it off and laughed. Why? Hecate, here's your sake. Minato said with a smile as he offered the goddess of magic a bowl of sake which she accepted with a nod. Minato sat beside her, looking at the moon while occasionally glancing at her. Did you enjoy your day, Hecate? he asked, and she nodded with her poker face still in place, making Minato sigh in defeat. No matter what he tried, he couldn't make her crack even a single tiny smile. All the expressions she had made today were blank, surprised, puzzled and calculating, which were exactly like her blank expression. At least, he knew the goddess beside him isn't as all-knowing as he thought. Laughing out loud, Minato looked at Hecate again to see her looking at him with her puzzled expression. "Why did you laugh? You also laughed when you lost that game." "Why?" Hecate asked, and Minato scratched the back of his head for a moment, his own puzzled questioning look also came to play. "Because, it was fun, wasn't it? I had thought this day would be just another normal day for me, but suddenly you came. Is it a bad thing?" "Nope, actually, I was very happy that you still remembered me." The two went into silence again, and Hecate took a sip of sake. It was strong but not enough to make her drunk, and the taste of it was somehow different than the alcohol she drank in Olympus. "Nah," Hecate the blonde said, and Hecate turned to him only to be surprised for a moment because of their closeness. Minato came to sit next to her, looking straight into her eyes with his cerulean blue ones. His face dead serious and his eyes had no deceptions in it. Hecate could feel her heartbeat faster every second and a blush coming to her face. In her mind, many thoughts and scenarios about them were playing at lightning speed. Some made her blush harder, while some made her want to blast the blonde away with Cocytus's core. "I must tell her my feelings, this could be the only chance I will ever have in my life," Minato thought and gulped. "Hecate, you came into my life when I was on the verge of dead, you saved my life and gave me the power I needed to protect the ones I care about. Without you, there would be no Minato. I was glad that I had found that old Yakai sage, took his training and became a sage myself, too. Because of it, I was able to meet you, my savior, my angel, my goddess," Minato said truthfully, with some tears streaming down his face. The goddess of magic just listened on, she had already known what he wanted to tell her, and her answer was pretty much obvious. "About your earlier question, I laughed because I was happy, and I was happy because you are here, with me, just the two of us." Namikaze Minato was a strange mortal, a kind, selfless man. He had somehow managed to cross the barriers she had set around her mind and her heart. He had somehow managed to make her feel love. She wanted to know more about him, wanted to know more about love, wanted to know more about this world. "I love you, Hecate." At that moment, for the first time after eons, Hecate smiled. A true beautiful smile that made Minato stun for a moment. She had already made her decision, maybe what she saw was true, maybe what Aphrodite said was true, she would take this chance and feel love for the first time in her immortal life. It was a simple answer, but that was all Minato waited for, and all Hecate needed to tell him. She accepted his feelings and would return his love for her. With that said, the two of them, sitting on top of Minato's house, kissed each other for the first time under the night sky of Kyoto. Back to Naruto at the park. After that, mother often came to father to talk with him or even spar with him. She gave him some advice on how to improve his magic and fighting skill, how to use runes and Fuinjutsu to strengthen his weapons and many more things. Sometimes later, a blonde demigod was born from their love for each other. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto said and looked at Aphrodite, who had sparkles in her eyes again. This story was so beautiful. And she didn't know that she had somehow appeared in Naruto's story as a matchmaker, even if she only said some weird things about their son. Naruto, why is your last name Uzumaki while your father's is Namikaze?" Naruto chuckled at that answer and scratched the back of his head. "About that, father told me that mother gave me this name because she didn't want the goddess of love, Aphrodite, to find out about me. She said she would corrupt me if I meet her." Aphrodite sweat dropped at the overprotective mother but understood her reasons for doing so. At that time, she was still in a relationship with that bastard Ares and just looked for mortal demigod for a change once in a while. She had to admit that she was a very sultry woman that time, but now, she had changed. She had changed for a better future, where she would live happily with Naruto and have a lot of kids with him. He was her true and only love for now and forever, she wouldn't betray him even if the entire world turned their back on him. "Ma died actually, I wanted to tell you something," Naruto said as he stood up and walked directly in front of Aphrodite. The goddess of love blushed and stood up as well. She had a clue about what he was going to say, but she couldn't help but be anxiety about what was about to happen. She still felt that bad feeling and it was getting stronger each minute. "Hi, Naruto-kun." Aphrodite fidgeted a little when Naruto walked closer to her. He put his hands on hers, held them together and looked straight into her ruby red eyes. Likewise, Aphrodite looked straight into Naruto's cerulean blue eyes and felt love and passion in them. She could also feel hate and Aphrodite's eyes widened when she felt a huge source of celestial power coming her way. This celestial power was so familiar that there was no way she would mistake it with someone else's. This strong, dark, fiery power full of hatred. Boom. Recommend Ost, we are Hollywood undead. Smoke filled the area as something suddenly fell out of the sky and landed in the park. Naruto narrowed his eyes and moved to stood in front of Aphrodite to protect her from whatever the threat was. The goddess of love was shivering. The dust blew away and finally, a figure came to view. Clad in fiery red armor with slick back red hair and red eyes, radiating an otherworldly power. "Long time no see, Dite," he said, and the goddess glared hatefully at him. Why now of all times? How could he know their location? Ares? "Long time no see, Dite," Ares said with a smirk on his face, ignoring the hateful death glare Aphrodite was sending him. Why now? Why now of all time? Ares, the goddess of love, whispered, but Naruto could clearly hear the name of the strange man standing before them with his enhanced senses. His eyes narrowed at the red-hair man he dubbed as a god based on the name Aphrodite called him and his strange appearance. "Who the hell are you? What are you to Dite?" Naruto asked, his body tensed, preparing for the worst. Ares, the god of war, is a very prideful and arrogant god. To him, mortal and demigod except his own child are no different than insect. Naruto knew that from some book about Greek mythology, and based on what those information, the god of war wouldn't descend to mortal realms without a good reason. For a good fight or for something involved him greatly. Naruto sent a suspicious look towards Aphrodite, but shook his head a moment later. Now wasn't the time. As for the god of war, he just looked at Naruto like he was looking at an insect, a trash, his head held high and his arms crossed together, standing there like an arrogant bastard. "Don't speak until spoken to, mortal. You are in no place to talk to me, the mighty god of war," Ares said arrogantly with a beepy smirk on his face and flared his power to scare the demigod away. Naruto stood still though, the power of this man. No, this god is great, but he wouldn't back down just because standing before him was a god with unlimited power. Ares raised a single eyebrow in interest at the blonde mortal. He had somehow managed to withstand his presence and power and now was staring at him intently, his face dead serious. "Interesting," Ares whispered with a bloodthirsty smirk on his face. He could see blue wisps coming out of the ground and swirling around the blonde mortal. Just that was enough for him to figure out his immortal parent. The son of Hecate, huh? This is just getting more and more interesting, Ares thought, hoping the mortal before him would prove himself to be challenged. It has been a long time since he had any good fight after all. "I will ask again, what are you to Dite, god of war, Ares?" Naruto asked seriously as he stood before Aphrodite, looking at Ares with all his seriousness. The god of war was snapped out of his thought to look at the blonde mortal. His mind registered the question and he smirked. "Isn't it obvious? Do you know Greek mythology? She is my lover, stupid," Ares said beepily and smirked when he saw the look of disbelief and hurt in Naruto's eyes. He saw the mortal opened and closed his mouth several times, but said nothing. The god of war raised an eyebrow in interest before his smirk widened. "Nah, tell me, mortal. What is her name?" Ares asked beepily like he had already knew the answer. As for Naruto, he glared at the god of war and answered truthfully from what he knew about his redhead companion. "Ite Nusa." Ares laughed loudly at the answer before he looked at the redhead behind Naruto while weeping his eyes off some stray tears. "Really, Aphrodite? Mixing your nickname with the name of your Roman counterpart? Ha 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 ha." The goddess of love just stood there silently, her hair shadowing her eyes and her lip a thin line. Just as her dream was about to become real, this bastard had come and ruined everything. Now that Naruto had found out her identity, he would hate her for sure. His mother, Hecate, had given him a different last name to hide him from her. Now that he had already known who she really is, he would stay away from her and want nothing to do with her anymore. That aside, she knew that Naruto had read a lot about Greek mythology and of course, also some myths about the goddess of love, Aphrodite her. That just made everything even worse. Her myths, her legends, her stories aren't that good to begin with. While Athena is respected and seen as a very good goddess with calm behavior and great wisdom, she is seen as nothing more than a slut, a whore because of her legends. She knew that those stories are true, but she had a good reason for doing that. She wants to find her true love. No man would bring himself to love a woman who had had sex with countless men and cheated on her husband for eons, even a man like Naruto. "Let me tell you something, pitiful mortal. You have been played the whole time by none other than the goddess of love, lust and beauty, Aphrodite. The greatest whore of Olympus." "Ha ha ha ha," Ares said and laughed loudly again, enjoying the look of betrayal, hurt and enraged in Naruto's eyes. Looking behind the blonde mortal for a moment, Ares' smirk just widened when he saw a single tear rolled on Aphrodite's cheek. "Good, feel even more despair, and when I kill your so-called destined love, you will be broken and be my toy again, stupid woman." Ares thought darkly and licked his lip while thinking of what he would do to Aphrodite's delicious body when he finally got her back. It had been a very long time since he last touched her body. "So will you step back and let me take her with me?" Ares asked as he walked closer to Naruto and Aphrodite. As first, he got no answer from the blonde, but eventually, he felt it, the dark ancient power with so much hate towards this world. Ares saw blue wisps turned red and entered the body of the blonde mortal now in his battle outfit, holding a three-pronged kunai in his hand. The god of war stopped and frowned. Normally, any other mortal would just let him take Aphrodite away without a word or even attack the goddess of love before let him do whatever he wanted. This blonde demigod was building up a pretty large amount of power inside his body and Ares didn't know what he wanted to do. Unlike other god and goddess, he doesn't have the ability to read people's thought due to his short temperature and not being able to concentrate enough to do that. He saw the blonde turned around and placed his hands on Aphrodite's shoulders. Ares smirked thinking that his plan had succeeded, but instinct kicked in and he had no tilted his head to his side to avoid a flying kunai. The god of war looked up with enraged face, only to see a tearful Aphrodite with a happy smile on her face kneeled on the ground, crying to herself in happiness, but no sight of the blonde mortal. Just as he was about to ask the goddess of love the whereabouts of Naruto, a shadow lumped over him and he looked back only for his face to be introduced to a swirling blue ball of energy and crashed to the ground with so much force that it created a crater. Standing just beside the crashed down Ares, Naruto, in his full battle outfit, glared down at the god of war with his red eyes, a side effect of using that forbidden power inside his body. He is Uzumaki Naruto, the guardian of New York, son of Hecate and Namikaze Minato. No one badmouth one of his precious people without facing punishment later. Even if the woman named Dite Venusa in truth is the goddess of love, Aphrodite, that didn't change anything. She is still one of his precious people and he would protect her with his life like he had vowed to himself that night. Ares showed no sign of moving until instinct kicked in making Naruto flip back just in time to avoid a blood-red spear falling from the sky, straight to his previous spot. Dust and debris flew everywhere as the red spear embedded itself to the ground. Naruto crouched down a safe distance from Ares and narrowed his eyes. The god of war was building up celestial power. "Oi oi, demigod, that hurt you know," a voice said from the cloud of smoke before Ares appeared, twirling the red spear in his hand like a master. Naruto looked on with impassive eyes and stood up, picking a three-pronged kunai out of his pocket, he pointed it towards Ares. "I challenge you to a fight of honor and power in which the loser must do whatever the winner want, god of war, Ares." Naruto said seriously and almost instantly, an insane grin appeared on the face of the god of war. A fight of honor and power, where the two combatants would fight to the death, no help from outside, no immortality and true god form allowed. Interesting. Naruto. What are you thinking? You will be killed. Standing on the sideline was Aphrodite, worried sick for her object of affection. Naruto is strong, and she is sure that he could fare pretty well against some minor god, but against someone like Ares, he had no chance. True, she was very touched by his actions and words, but if he died because of her, how could she face his mother? How could she bring herself to love someone again? "Don't worry, I won't die that easily," Dite Naruto said with a smile and despite the situation, Aphrodite blushed. "Just don't die, Naruto. At least, not because of me," Aphrodite thought the last part to herself before she looked up with the fire of determination burning in her eyes. If Naruto had decided to fight Ares on his own, she would stand in sideline and cheer for him. This was the fight of honor and power, and it would be broadcast on the entire Olympus. If she tried to help him, it would only hurt his pride and she didn't want that. Naruto knew challenging a god to a fight is extremely stupid, but for the sake of those precious to him, he would take on this hard challenge and come out victory. After he won the fight, he would ask Ares to vow on river Styx to leave Aphrodite and his family alone. Knowing the importance of a vow made on river Styx, the god of war wouldn't dare to come and try anything again, or so he guessed. "Daring to challenge me to a fight of honor and power, you are brave, demigod, I will give you that. Tell me your name, and we will begin," Ares said beepily as golden dust swirling around him before a black coat made from the skin of Nemean lion appeared on his shoulder with his symbol printed proudly in yellow on his back. Name, Uzumaki Naruto, son of Hecate and Namikaze Minato. The guardian of New York. An insane grin appeared on Ares' face, and he snapped his finger. A barrier immediately formed around them. "This will be our battlefield, no one will be affected by our battle. Show me your power, demigod." Ares shouted with his grin still on display and charged forward with his red spear now engulfed in fire. Seeing the incoming form of his opponent, Naruto took a step back and threw several kunai at Ares and the area around them before flashing away, completely avoid Ares' attack. As for the god of war, his smirk just widened and with a mighty swing, Ares created wave of fire flying toward Naruto who had just appeared behind him. Flashing away again, Naruto held out his hand and formed a normal Rasengan before running at Ares with his top speed. Ares smirked. "A straight attack won't help you, demigod," the god of war thought before charging up his spear with fire like a drill and thrust it, releasing a torrent of fire flying straight toward the blonde demigod. Time seemed to stop when the torrent of fire and Naruto only several apart from each other. Bang. And with that, Ares got crashed down again with Naruto grinding a Rasengan into the head of the mighty god of war. He had flashed to the kunai behind Ares just before his attack could hit him and slammed the Rasengan on top of his head again. The force behind the attack pushed Ares deep into the ground and creating spiderweb crater around the god of war. Naruto was using the power of QB to enhance his power, so it's obvious that just a normal Rasengan could do that much damage. He was using two tails after all. Naruto flipped back to take some deep breaths, waiting for Ares to get up while also thinking up some new strategy. He knew that the god of war wouldn't be caught in the same trap twice or in this case, thrice. Just as he expected, Ares was no joke as he stood up after that, grinning from ear to ear. Interesting, you are stronger than I expected, demigod. But Ares' golden aura turned red and his celestial power increased. This blonde demigod was interesting. It had been a long time since he had had some serious fight, of course, not counting his little incident with Aphrodite and Apollo. That will be the last time you can lay a hit on me, he announced arrogantly and charged at Naruto again, his spear engulfed in fire. We will see it, Ares. Naruto said with a frown on his face. Honestly, he didn't know how much longer can he last against Ares. He had used two tails and using more than two could make him lose consciousness and control over his body. Ares was becoming more and more powerful though Naruto gritted his teeth and decided to take a gamble by releasing the third tail. Almost instantly, his celestial power burst and he felt stronger than he had ever been, but at the same time, he could feel all the hatred and painful feelings this power had. It made him almost go crazy, but miraculously, Naruto managed to withstand it and jumped sideways to avoid being stabbed by his opponent. Picking out two more kunai, Naruto enhanced them with his forbidden power and clashed with Ares. Just one clash from the two combatants had sent blasts of wind all around the battlefield. The clash continued with neither combatants willingly give up, they stood strong, exchanging blow with each other's taking in more and more bruises. Standing in the sidelines, Aphrodite couldn't take her eyes off the battle. Her object of affection, her lover, was battling Ares with all his might and power to protect her from the god of war. For that reason, Aphrodite had silently made a vow to River Styx to never, ever betray Naruto. She would fully devoted herself to him and only him for eternity. Whoever you really are, that doesn't matter. I will protect you with my life if you wish, Dite. Tell me, do you want to come with him? Aphrodite remembered the short conversation she had had with Naruto before this fight happened, a conversation that had brought so many tears and happiness to her. No, I want to stay here with you, Naruto. I love. Naruto placed a finger on her lip, preventing the goddess of love from saying anything. He smiled gently at the goddess before holding Aphrodite by her shoulder. That's all I need to know. Naruto turned around but was stopped by the goddess of love. Why? You know my true identity, you know that I had lied to you, Naruto. Why are you still protecting me? Because you are my precious people. Aphrodite smiled and shed some tears at remembering those words. Those words had lit up her world again when she thought that darkness had once again covered it. Those words had given her hope about a better future she would have with Naruto, and those words had deepened the love she had for him. Boom. A sounding boom snapped Aphrodite out of her thought, and she looked up to see Naruto blasted away holding his left arm, his body full of bruises. Ares was no better either. His coat had been shred to pieces, and his armor had been destroyed during the battle. Bruises could be seen here and there, but that insane grin still on his face. Naruto. Aphrodite shouted out worriedly at seeing the blonde was just barely standing up. Blood covered his body, and his breath was getting ragged. Naruto was at his limit. Ahahaha. Interesting, so interesting. It had been a long time since a puny mortal could push me to this point. Hahaha. Ares laughed out loud and charged up his spear with fire, heating the whole area up with its immense heat. Naruto looked up and glared at the god of war. He had dealt quite a large damage on the god of war, but he still stood there, grinning like nothing had happened. Naruto coughed out blood and frowned. He gritted his teeth and used the blood on his hand to sweep the kanji for 4 on his left wrist. 4 tails. It was his last attack on the god of war. Arg. Naruto shouted out in pain as his body was engulfed in a red aura of tainted energy. It hurt like hell, and it was burning his skin while fueling his mind with rage and hatred at the same time. He held body, trying his best to take control over the ominous power of the being inside him. He could hear Aphrodite shouting on the sideline, telling him to stop and just surrendered. He could hear Ares laughing like crazy while charging up power for his next attack. I can't lose here. With that thought in mind, and a final cry of pain and determination, the red aura around Naruto's body was sucked into his body. Immediately after taking control over that ominous power, Naruto stood up and created a normal Rasengan in his hand. With QB's tainted power inside his body, the normally blue Rasengan had turned purple, but Naruto paid it no mind in favor for focusing more power into his technique and upgraded to the Rasen Shuriken. The wind swirled around his purple Rasengan, embracing it and enhanced the technique. A purple Rasen Shuriken was formed and rotating in Naruto's hand. The blonde demigod looked at Ares and without any other delay, the two charged at each other. Naruto with the purple Rasen Shuriken. Ares with his red spear engulfed in a torrent of fire bigger than ever, rotating like a giant fire drill. Rasen Shuriken. Fire Emperor. Buam. The entire New York shook as the two techniques collided with each other, creating a big explosion. Aphrodite looked on worriedly with hand intertwined together like she was praying. It was silent before the goddess of love could see the outcome of the devastating battle. Ares was laying on the ground, defeated, and Naruto was kneeling just before the god of war, holding his bruised body. Almost immediately, Aphrodite jumped at Naruto and embraced him with all her might, a cheerful smile on her face and tears flowing out of her eyes freely. "You won, Naruto. You won." The goddess of love shouted out and laughed heartily after that with Naruto followed suit, but weakly. We won." At the same time Mount Olympus. All the Olympians presented at the throne room had their eyes widened at the sight before them. Ares had been put down and by a mortal no less. The battle was great. The blonde demigod had beat Ares in his mortal form, but still, that was an impressive feat for a demigod to archive. About an hour ago, Ares, the god of war, had come to invite them to the throne room to watch a movie and they did. When they arrived, Ares was nowhere to be seen, and when they were about to return to their temple, a magical rainbow screen appeared, showing Ares facing a blonde demigod, who some of the goddess realized is Aphrodite's current boyfriend and the goddess of love herself. They pitied Aphrodite for having her love broken by Ares like that, but when Naruto attacked and defeated Ares, they had been surprised. What is that puny mortal thinking? Assaulting a god, especially my son, is a crime. He must be punished and put down. Zeus shouted out from his throne and stood up, already charged up power to smite the mortal who had dared to attack his son with his master bolt. "Just try, I will make sure you can see your headless body from the ground," Zeus said, a cold voice behind the mighty god of storm, catching everyone's attention and stopped Zeus in his track. Crouching on Zeus's throne was Hera in her own battle outfit. Actually, she always in her battle outfit, pressing the tip of her sword on Zeus's neck. Her face dead serious yet still beautiful, her ruby red eyes glared coldly into the head of her so-called husband. The sight made every gods and goddesses presented widen their eyes in shock and disbelief. Hera, the goddess of marriage, woman and motherhood, was threatening Zeus. "Remove your sword right now, Hera, and I'll see that nothing has happened. Put your master bolt away." Hera. "This enough. Remove your we. Put your master bolt away, Zeus. I won't let you harm Naruto." Hera shouted angrily, her power flaring full force and red markings could be seen forming on her body like a tattoo. She was being serious. Without another words, Zeus put his master bolt away by flashing it to his temple. He was at a disadvantage by having her sword pressed against his neck, so taking the wise move, Zeus calmed himself down and suppressed his power, which had been flaring ever since he wanted to smite that blonde mortal below. Seeing Zeus putting his weapon and suppressing his power, Hera also put her sword away and returned to her throne without another words. She knew by doing that, she had already alerted Zeus about her loyalty, but if she didn't do that, Naruto would be smit by that bastard. She had taken a great interest in the blonde and had already decided what to do in the future. Today's event just made her want to make him her more. A man who readily used his own life to protect those precious to him, readily embraced the guilty bad past of his lover and forgive her. Selfless, strong, brave, kind, loving and caring, being a heartbreaker is just a bonus. Hera wants that man, she wants that man to be her partner for eons and for eternity. There would be hell to those who wanted to stop her from turning him into her husband, Zeus included. "Calm down, dear father." That mortal had challenged Ares to a duel and he had accepted. Surely, no one had expected that Ares would lose, but now that it had happened, you can't do anything about that. Apollo said, and the others also put in their own opinions about the fight, ignoring the fuming Zeus. That demigod is strong and the tainted power he used feels suspiciously like Tiffin. Athena said with her hand supporting her chin, thinking about the blonde enigma. True to Aphrodite's story, he is strong, in fact, he is too strong to be a normal demigod. He would ask him later when he arrived here, at Olympus. No doubt Zeus would be summoning him later and tried to punish him again or something so that Uzumaki Naruto would be here soon. And if anything happened, she would protect him from her father's wrath. She couldn't bring herself to see her best friend Aphrodite if anything happened to her boyfriend when she was here. Athena turned a calculating gaze at Hera. The goddess was smiling softly with her eyes closed, even though she had just committed an act of treason by pointing her sword at Zeus, the king of Olympus. How could she do that? She was aware of her bad blood with Zeus, but for Hera to do that there had to be something else. "I won't let you harm Naruto." Athena's eyes widened when she remembered Hera's words and the expression of pure rage on her face when she said that. Hera could be a calm and collected goddess these days, but in the past, she was very short in temper and a real hothead. It had been eons since their last saw Hera being that angry. Even when Zeus sired child with other woman, Hera had never been that angry before. Don't tell me, Athena thought with her own poker face came into play. No words could fully describe what she was feeling right now, so the goddess of wisdom just sighed and smiled weakly to herself. Olympus would be in a lot of trouble when that happened. With Ares. I lost to a puny mortal. Ares thought with rage. How could he, the mighty god of war, lost to some puny mortal with strange power? He couldn't accept that, wouldn't accept that. Fight of honor and power. Screw it. He was going to show that puny mortal where he really stand before his might. But Naruto and Aphrodite. While the couple was just embracing each other, feeling each other's warm, an ominous feeling hit them, and immediately, their eyes widened at the laying form of Ares. The god of war was standing up with golden dust flying from the sky into his body, healed all the wounds he had received from his previous clash with Uzumaki Naruto. His aura, while still the same, was now stronger and felt even more enraged and frustrated than before. He turned his head around with his back facing them, that insane grin still on his face. Aphrodite gasped. She knew what was about to happen. Ares was calling upon his celestial power from his temple to awaken his true god form. Ares, bastard, what are you trying to do? Ares paid her no mind though, he just looked at Naruto with his insane grin, and then, snapped his finger. His fiery red spear appeared out of nowhere and flew straight toward the blonde demigod. Splash. Aphrodite's eyes widened in horrified as she looked at the form of her lover. The spear had flown straight and fast towards Naruto and had stabbed him in his chest. Blood poured out of his mouth and chest non-stop, his eyes dropped down lifelessly, and his breathing stopped. His body fell forward until with a thud, Naruto was now laying on the ground in his own pool of blood. Naruto. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.